Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Brando and Joe podcast. For this podcast episode, our guest is Jill Livingston. She is receiving her master's in psychology at NYU, IO Psychology, and has experience working as an associate for a financial leadership development program, strategic investing, and as a summer analyst. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We're super excited to have you on here back talking to people about their graduate programs. You know, it's really interesting. We've been comparing like a lot of the New York schools just with like our local friends, and NYU is always considered that gold standard. So we're really excited to have you on here so we can like talk about how great NYU is in comparison to how great Hofstra is.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's all relative, but I think each program has sort of their, bread and butter. So it'll be really interesting to hear, different perspectives. So really excited, yeah, to hear from you guys.
One thing I was interested when doing our little like deep for every guest we do like a little debrief. I'm like, all right, what did they do? Like because you can hear from that intro. It seems like you have a background in finance. Is that correct?
Yep, yeah, I do. So I actually graduated undergrad with a finance degree and sort of, stepped into corporate finance for about a year and a half, 2 years. And that was actually right when COVID hit. And I just remember thinking, being in the office and nothing really felt right. I was always more interested in the people that were working around me and just, the behaviors of people and the group dynamics and just like all the people related things. And so again, this was right before COVID, and then we all got sent home, of course. And I just started doing some research and I thought, man, maybe this is really the time to, change my career. And so spoke to some folks at the company that I was with at the time in HR. And they sort of started mentioning this degree in IO. Some of them had a degree in IO, some of them just knew about IO. And, the more they spoke about it, the more I kept hearing of kind of the business side and also the people side. And for me, that was exactly what I was looking for, this marriage of two concepts that I was always interested in, but never knew that it was really a field. So kind of did some research, looked at some programs, looked at Hofstra's program, looked at NYU's program, looked at Columbia's program. And to be quite honest with you, the only reason I ended up only applying to NYU is because they had waived the standardized exam. And at the time, I was kind of just, looking around, trying to get into something as soon as possible because I had quit my job, actually. And, to this day, I feel incredibly fortunate to be here in the program. And it's been a wild ride, but, again, really only here because I feel like of the waiving of the standardized exam. So, again, been a tough ride, but been an awesome ride, and definitely wouldn't change anything.
It's so funny that you say that too, because I know you and I, when we were at Metro, we were talking a lot about how we ended up in IO and we had very similar somewhat similar career paths and mentalities. Yep. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. So being somebody who does come from a business background as well, for you, Jill, when you're in class now and you're learning these IO concepts, is it something that's been a little bit easier for you, or has it been a struggle like when you first started to try and like build off the business acumen that you had and going into that IO field?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question because when I first stepped into the program, I felt very imposter. Like, I remember the first class I stepped into was Intro to IO Psychology. And, I remember sitting there and sort of looking to my right and looking to my left and thinking like, wow, I don't know any of these psych concepts. And I felt really just had this like kind of pit in my stomach. Like, was this the right decision? So definitely felt out of place. I will say, I think 2 years of confidence building has gotten me a little bit further from feeling like that. And I think now I sort of look at it from a bit of a optimist point of view and sort of say like, I do offer, kind of the business side, and I do understand a little bit more of the business than perhaps some of my other colleagues coming straight out of undergrad. And that's not to say that my entire program and cohorts are straight out of undergrad, but there's people like me, people that are more experienced than me, less. But I think at the time I made the general assumption that most people were right out of undergrad, and I just kind of fell behind. But it definitely was a tough adjustment. But I think, like I said, now I feel just more comfortable with where I'm at and sort of the marriage of the two. So
It's funny hearing that because I kind of had the opposite problem coming from like a psych background. Like some of the more business
yeah.
terms, I was very not confident in.
Mm-hmm.
So at NYU, because for Hofstra, we have to take like a select amount of classes and there's like kind of hand picked.
Yep.
But if we were able to choose, I maybe would have picked some of those more like business sided just to kind of learn more about that.
Yep.
At NYU, are you guys able to pick those types of classes, or is it kind of like Hofstra where it's you have a pre like set schedule?
I would say there's definite flexibility, right? I think we're able to cross register into different schools. So for example, for me, obviously, like we just talked about, I have a business background. And so I was interested in possibly like cross registering into Stern. So I actually was able to do that last summer. I took a Stern class that was phenomenal. And just was really able to get that exposure. So Joe, to your point, we are able to take some electives in addition to sort of the set requirements that we do have to take. So there is flexibility there. And again, you can sort of flex to what you perhaps want to learn, something in business or maybe a strength of yours or a weakness, depending on where you want to take that. But there is flexibility. Yeah.
Have there other? I've like Brendan. I feel like other people we talked to, they've been able to take electives too. Are we like the only school that they can't? We can't do that.
Yeah,
Oh
we
gosh.
are, I believe, one of the only ones so far of the guests that we've had that can do that. But so what you were saying there, Jill. So basically, like you took like an NYU business class and like you've done stuff like that. I know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
this is your last semester, correct?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so I'll be graduating in less than a month now. So yeah,
Well, early congrats for sure.
thank you
But
very much.
that
Thank
does
you.
lead me to my next point, especially someone who has basically been through the majority of the program already. Would you say, looking back, what was the most effective class for you and applying that to your IO learning that you've been doing so far?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I was actually just on an admitted students call on Thursday, and this question came up. Sort of what was your favorite class, or what did you learn the most in? And the great thing about NYU, I think, is that there are professors that have real world experience, as well as some that have only academic experience. So, I think both offer, tremendous value. But for me, I think the one class that sort of put it all together for me was personnel selection. I'm not sure if Hofstra has a similar class or not.
Yeah,
But
we do.
yeah, you do. Okay. So, it was a fairly analytical class. But I think I mentioned it sort of put it all together, put all the pieces together. And what I mean by that is that, it used sort of concepts from the intro to IO class that I took, as well as statistics. We used R and Excel, of course, to sort of manipulate data and do some data analysis. And of course, we've talked about, I came from a business background, particularly finance. And so I do like, that sort of analytical approach to things, but also like presenting it in sort of a, easily digestible way, but with a people focus. So that's obviously what I liked about this program. But yeah, so the personnel selection class was just, learned about adverse impact and had data to sort of prove it and sort of come to a suggestion or a strategy for changing a personnel selection system. So I thought that just really put it all together, and something that honestly would be done in a job, right? That is a potential career path out of our programs. So really thought that was just a useful class, and the professor was really incredible. Dr. Christopher Rotolo, just an awesome guy. Really has a ton of knowledge. Yeah, so really a great class.
We were talking about like the exams that we're in that personal selection class right now.
No kidding.
And Brandon and I
Okay.
were just talking about like how much we love the like working with the data. And we're actually working on like a project now where we get to use
Yep.
Excel. One thing is we don't use R, we use the software program Jamovi, which
okay.
is I think a difference for our schools too, because we kind of discussed how we were like we kind of wish we learned R because I feel like that's what's used mostly in the corporate world.
Yeah.
But no, it is cool. Like it kind of it introduced us into like people analytics part of IO and
Yeah.
maybe like the more data centric that you don't get with some of the other classes.
Yeah.
Are there skills that you feel like you've learned in your IO classes that like you were like, oh, this was important, whether that's R or like learning with like kind of different softwares?
Absolutely. I was very familiar with Excel, having used it in you know, 3 of the previous roles I had prior to coming to grad school. However, R was something I was not familiar with. So I think that is a great skill, and I think also offers some transferable skills as well. I know Python is a big one that people use as well, and I've heard some sort of um, similarities between the two programs. So definitely offers, or our program offers some exposure to those programming languages if you so wish to do so. So, and the great thing, the other thing about R is I think it's fairly intuitive and fairly user friendly. I don't know if you guys ever played around with like macros in Excel at all. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. I think it's less clunky than macros. And the best part is that R is free. So, you can download it and play around and, download data sets and like libraries. So I think it's a great program, definitely.
We have it. We had to use it in my undergrad, so like I had that experience for it because I like when we use Jamovi in our classes. From my experience with R versus Jamovi, Jamovi is just really simple and it can do a lot of the stuff, but it can't. It's not like necessarily as much of, I guess, an engine as what R is.
Okay.
And but with that too, Jill, you mentioned Python.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been practicing with Python too?
I have not. There is opportunity to do so, I think, in a couple of our labs at NYU, but I have not been involved in any sort of research lab. So I have not had exposure to Python, no.
That's understandable, though. It's something that's like, I feel like it's not a necessity, and especially like so I guess that kind of leads me to my next question with you is so as somebody who is about to graduate from the program and have learned all this material from the program, so for you, Jill, are you thinking what's your next steps for you?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to have an internship last year here in New York City in a compensation role, which was pretty, Excel heavy. Learned a ton, was great exposure to, sort of compensation structures and frameworks and, legal documentation and sort of reading through different, documents to that nature. So that was really great exposure, and I was fortunate enough to meet some really great people at the bank, and ended up getting a return offer for an internal consulting team or strategy team. So
congratulations.
Congrats.
That's so exciting.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. So yeah, I'll be returning there in July. So really excited to sort of, dip my toe into a totally different area that I'm used to, but really looking forward to it. Yeah.
No, compensation is like a thing that just like a topic that not a lot of people have heard about, but it is like it's very exciting. Like it's a pretty cool role.
Yep.
And now that you're going more into that like practitioner field. Was NYU have like more of that academic research base to it, or were you guys more focused on, going out into the field and like getting a job versus maybe trying to extend your time and get a PhD?
Yeah, the beauty I think of the program is that it allows you to do kind of both. Of course, there's not set in stone like concentrations, if you will, and I'm not sure if Hofstra has that, program
Mm-mm.
structure at all, but you can sort of inexplicitly kind of go toward a concentration. So if you are into the more people analytics side of things, like I mentioned, you can step into some different research labs that have that more analytical focus. Or you can kind of shy away from that, right? So I chose to shy away from it, and just took the master's statistics class and kind of left it at that. Definitely still had exposure through other classes, our research methods class, as well as the personnel selection class that I was mentioning earlier. But again, I think, it prepares you for either. So there's folks graduating in May alongside of me that are going on to a PhD. One of my close friends is going to get her PhD after this. So there's certainly, and she also took the more analytical route. Actually, she was in that lab I was just referencing, kind of the people analytics lab. And so you can choose different routes. So I think that's really the beauty of the program for sure.
No, that is cool. Brandon, I feel like we're similar. There's definitely like some rumors of people going around like, oh, maybe I'll do a PhD, maybe I'll do the PhD, but it's
Yeah.
there's like definitely like a healthy mix.
Okay.
But Jill, do you think you'll ever go back to like
Uh,
get your PhD? Maybe in
yeah.
I know it's a tough because I battle with it too, especially
Right.
if
I
you're interested
know.
in teaching.
I
But then
know.
we've also heard that people who become adjunct professors have only master's degrees as well. So it's definitely maybe a little more tough to get that sort of position, but it's definitely tough. I
Yeah.
don't know. At 10 years, like, where do you see yourself?
I know. I know. No, it's an excellent question. It's funny. I was actually just talking to a professor about this on Wednesday after class. I was just kind of picking her brain about, when she got her PhD, did she take a break between masters and, working in the field and then getting her PhD? But yeah, it's a question I think about a lot, or an idea that I think about a lot. I, it's not out of, I would say it's not out of kind of question for me. I think my goal is to definitely be a part of an organization where I can, hopefully make a pretty big impact, whatever that means. Whether it's leading, a team of a couple hundred or a team of two and still making, an impact. I'm not sure what that will look like, but I just want to be a part of a really great team, that's hardworking, diligent, committed, but also, likes to have fun, and, make a difference. And I think that's what I care about most. And hopefully one day I kind of get to that position. And then if a PhD is an attractive, you know, um, avenue at the time, then maybe. But if it's, I think it'll be almost right time, right place kind of thing. So yeah, not the best answer, but
No, it was perfect.
No, that's perfect, and I think that's something like you touch on there that attracts all of us to the field. I know, like we go around, and that was like the coolest thing that I learned at PsyOp was
yeah,
like something that I was always saying was like when I was going around talking to people and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to do a job where not only did I like what I did, but I felt like I was making an impact. And I didn't have the chops to be a therapist. And
yeah,
I was like, this is not something that I can do. So I feel like that's kind of what brings all of us to IO is like we all want to make like a considerable impact, and we see people in their work lives, which consumes like their entire life basically, and trying to make
exactly.
that just like a sliver bit better can like really lead to all the difference.
I absolutely agree with that. And to your point, Brandon, I think a lot of us kind of get into this field because of that. Most people, at least in our program, obviously, don't, necessarily want to be a therapist, but have tried to find sort of a happy medium between, going the corporate route and, going the therapy route. So, this program is sort of the perfect blend to an extent. Yeah.
No, yeah. 100%. It's like helping people.
Yeah.
We have someone in our program who's now doing it, and she is a therapist and is going IO like from
No
therapy, like
kidding.
working clinically.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's definitely something that we see out there for sure.
Yes. Yep.
No, but so back to what we were kind of talking about there, Jill. Like, I kind of want to bring us full circle now and kind of leave you with something and we can kind of discuss. So, with everything you were talking about, what brought you to your program at NYU and how you ended up there and the ways that you've utilized the program, what are some ways, like looking back at now it's your time to graduate, what are some ways that you wish like you would have kind of, or information you would have had for like that prospective student out there who's trying to also get into the same situation?
Yeah. I think about this from time to time, and I try to do a lot of self-reflection, and I actually just recently read Adam Grant's Think Again book, which, to be honest, kind of changed my life in a few different ways, for the better, I think. But I think about what I would change, and the first semester here in the program, I really took on a heavy load. I was working like 35 hours a week just at, like I was working at a gym. So, not incredibly draining in terms of like a mental drain, but it was work nonetheless. And I was up at 5 a.m., had to be at work at 5:30, done at 2, and then would turn around and go to class at 5 or 7 o'clock, and that was a grind for me. I did that for the first semester of being in the program, and I wouldn't say I regret it, but I learned a ton from that. And so I think, Brandon, to your question, my advice to students is, and of course this is easy for me to say looking back, is don't overextend yourself. Don't get involved in too much. This is something that has been a trend of mine throughout my life, and should have learned by now, but we're working on it. Self-awareness, but don't overextend yourself. Obviously, most of us in these programs are go-getters for the most part. You want to do well. You want to get a good job, so you want to build up your resume. But the reality is that sometimes you cannot always handle everything you take on, and you have to know when to say no. So my advice to students would be, really try and take a step back and ask yourself what really matters to me. And if that's having a job, right? If you need the financial support, I understand. But then it's maybe taking less classes and then extending your time in the program, right? Maybe you don't finish it in 2 years, maybe you finish it in 2.5. So take a step back, ask yourself what matters most. Can you afford to do the program full time? And if the answer is yes, my advice is really immerse yourself in the content and what you're learning. Because that's one thing that I wish I had done. I was taking statistics the first semester, and we were talking about that a little bit before. And, I was really struggling just because I couldn't, fork over the time. I was struggling for, waking up every morning and kind of getting all the work done. So take a step back, look what's on your plate. If you can take anything off, highly suggest it, reconsider and immerse yourself, because, you've got one shot, and, you're here to learn. So that's my advice.
No, that is great advice. Because there's so many opportunities, especially in grad school, that you can take on. You're like, I should do this, I should do this, put this on my resume, learn this, learn that. But then when you spread yourself too thin, and then you realize the effort that you're putting into each separate project is not the amount of effort that you should be putting into it, and you're like, I could be doing a better job. So really take Jill's advice and pick out those select things that like you really
Yep.
value and enjoy, and then excel at those things and do as best as you can. And then you'll get so much more out of that experience
Yep.
than you would, taking on like 10 separate projects and being like, oh, I'm only working on this like
Yep.
once a week and now I'm not,
Yep.
performing. And it's,
Yeah, because I like Joe what you mentioned. The tough part is like we look at all these job or descriptions, and we're all applying for things, and it's like, you need all these different requirements and whatnot, and so it's kind of a double-edged sword what I said, because you want to pour yourself into a few specific things, but then you sort of get tricked by reading different job descriptions, and you're saying to yourself, gosh, this description or this role wants, Python. They want leadership skills. They want, 4 years of experience. They want, I mean, the list can go on. And so that's almost what tempts you to overextend yourself and get too involved, because you're trying to match these, roles that you're seeing on, LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever you're looking at. So it's so hard, it's kind of like a double-edged sword what I described, but just know that the right role will come up, and the right company will present itself, and you will be where you're meant to be ultimately. I really truly believe that someone will notice you for who you are, and the skills that you have. So I think it's all meant to be in the end, but I totally get the temptation. I feel like I'm there every day, trying to understand what skills I can add to my resume, or LinkedIn Learning, or any of those things. You guys get the gist. So
No, like I did want to say too, like when I hear you talk about that, Jill, I think that's great advice because, you know, as grad students, I feel like we're constantly being told like get involved in this, do this, make sure you do everything. And like we all do. But then we like also pay the price, and I think that that's something that's definitely we should focus on. And I know Joe and I kind of talked about this. Like PSYOP really opened our eyes for a lot of things, but one of
mhm.
the things that it did open our eyes for as well is it made IO psychology not just like a field, but a lifestyle. So like when you're in the program,
Oh
make it
wow,
your
I like
lifestyle
that.
and make it
Yeah.
something that you care about. And, and I feel like it's true though. Like I feel like this is something that we can really like dive into and make it part of it. And we don't have to like see it as necessarily work. And if it's not work, then it's not going to drain us as much. And you might be able to do some of the more things, but try to not like limit yourselves on like the amount that you're, or force yourselves to do as much as you can. Like we talk about that all the time, Joe, where we're like, maybe we're doing too much. And
no, you're
Oh
right.
yes.
This is such a wholesome episode. I love
Oh,
it. So sweet.
I love it.
but it's true. But
It's
no,
so true.
Jill,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today. We
Oh,
appreciate you and like your expertise being an NYU student, and hopefully our viewers out there can break down the differences between NYU and Hofstra. We really appreciate your time.
oh, thank you so much, guys. It's a Saturday morning here for me, and it's pouring, but you guys were the sun in my day,
Mm-hmm.
so really appreciate it.
Ah, what a better way to start a weekend,
Oh,
Oh yeah, 100%.
thank you again, guys. Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much,
it.
Jill.
Yeah, no problem.
Take care.
You too, guys.
So that was pretty cool. We haven't had a student on in such a long time, but it was kind of like refreshing to hear different graduate students and their perspectives and their certain programs. I really want to make sure that we have on more students, and especially from programs all around the country, and we could just like kind of hear their perspective on the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important that we get those voices out there for people who are in these programs, because as people like who started this on our and we're in our first year now, some of the information we've been getting over the last couple months would have really helped when we were applying to all of our programs and trying to figure out if IO psychology was the right thing for us.
No, 100%. I'm hoping that, especially over the summer, we can kind of like extend, especially I mean, every episode, but especially the student episodes to other prospective students, and they can get a feel like maybe Hofstra isn't the right program for you, and NYU offers a better course load, or vice versa. So hopefully it
Yeah.
reaches out.
I think it's great to like see the different perspectives and hear like what other programs offer, because you can look up stuff online and like then we'll talk to someone in the program and be like, I never saw that or heard that anywhere else. But either way, thank you guys so much for listening this week, and we look forward to being with you guys next week.
Bye, everyone.